All right. I believe we are live. Wait for everybody to get in here. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. Yeah. All right. I'll do some ASMR while you guys are joining the live stream. Like this. Welcome to my live stream. We got a lot to talk about today. All right. So we'll get into the Iran stuff on the second half. I always start with the map update, so that's what we're going to go over first. I hope everybody's doing good today. Sorry that this stream is a little later in the evening. I hope that everybody doesn't get too upset with the late update. I'm sorry if you're watching this recorded. It's not my intention. I hope that everybody can watch it live, but if you can't watch it live, if you're watching this via recording, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Talk about my bald head or something. That is very helpful and helps get more eyes on the videos. So I appreciate that. For everybody watching live right now, go follow me on Twitter. I forgot that I need to put that in my thing. Sorry, everybody. Hold on. You can go find it in the description on YouTube. I'll put it, boom, Twitter. There you go. Go follow me on Twitter, everybody. Go follow me on Twitter. Go follow me on Telegram. You can find my Telegram as my pinned tweet, I think, unless my pinned tweet is my map. Oh, well, we'll figure it out, boys. We'll figure it out. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. Hopefully everybody's doing good. All right, we'll get into it now. People are starting to come in. All right. So we are going to talk about some updates. I hope everybody's doing good. Yesterday, we didn't go over any updates, so we got some pretty big developments occurring that we need to talk about. Specifically, today, we are going to be talking about the Chasiv Yar area and the Avdiivka salient right here. But most importantly, what I want to start with is the events that are currently taking place in Krasnohorivka. If you guys subscribe to me on Twitter, you will have seen my battle report for the Battle of Krasnohorivka. It is transpiring exactly how I thought, that the Russians would focus on pushing in from this southern section. This particular area is isolated by a railroad right here. So it is already physically isolated from the rest of the city. It's a good place for the Russians to enter. And, you know, set it up to be a launch off point for further assaults deeper into the city. I did not expect this area to fall as quickly, but the Russians have made some pretty significant advances and have gained a foothold. And now we are getting geolocations from this area right here, as well as a geolocation of this railroad building right here. It kind of almost looks like a church. But I think it's actually part of the rail station, was struck by a Ukrainian HIMARS strike. So this building is no longer standing. This is significant for a number of reasons. Number one, the fact that the Ukrainians are using HIMARS guided artillery this close to the front as frontline artillery, basically trying to halt the advance of the Russians in the city, is not a good sign. It speaks to the decrepit artillery shell shortage that the Ukrainians are currently facing, probably also a barrel shortage at this point. It's probably both. And now they're using HIMARS trying to stop Russian advances. I believe that Krasnohorivka, this city, is going to fall a lot quicker than people think it's going to fall. I think that this area is going to be neglected because it is, you know, it has such stable defenses that the, you know, I don't think that the Ukrainians thought that they were going to need as many reserves in this area. I think the reserves are now getting pretty worn out with the consistent glide bomb strikes and heavy artillery barrages we see. This place is getting hit 24/7. So no rest for the Ukrainians, particularly this industrial area has been hit multiple times. This building alone has been hit by 2 Fab 1500s. So the bombardment of this town is quite significant, and the Russians are making significant progress into the town, as we can see down here. This is no laughing matter for the Ukrainians. If the Russians make it into or reach this industrial zone, it's going to be very, very hard to hold the rest of Krasnohorivka. And when this section falls and the Russians get in behind these defenses, things are going to move very quick from this direction. And then holding this town becomes much, much more difficult. You can see it has quite a difficult logistics situation. It only has this railroad, this road, which is a dirt road. So again, it's not impossible with the current weather conditions to keep supplied along this road. However, the dirt is not where you want to be usually. And then over here, I think we have the only paved road. Yeah. Back over here. Again, still not particularly well paved. I don't know why my map isn't loading. There we go. Not particularly well paved back here, but still decent. So supply to this area, though, is going to become much more difficult. It's sort of isolated from the rest of the staging settlements. The Russians are very close. I think Krasnohorivka is going to be that area where it's there one day, and then the next day it just kind of collapses. I think that's what you're going to see here. And I think you're going to see a lot more Krasnohorivkas start happening as the Ukrainians become worse and worse off on the battlefield. Guys, remember, if you have questions that you want to have answered on stream, you can go ahead and do that through Super Thanks. That's the easiest way to support me, and it's the easiest way for me to actually see your questions. But without further ado, we'll continue on. We have some pretty major advances. This one I'm actually not sure about, so I'm actually going to change it to purple. It appears that the Ukrainians have retreated out of Simkivka. However, there are conflicting reports right now, so I'm going to keep it in purple. We did get a geolocation right around this area in the center of town, which means the last logistics line into the town has been cut. I don't know how the Ukrainians plan on staying here. I don't think they are here, but until we get confirmation, I'm going to keep it in purple, and I'm actually going to move it up here. All right. And then the most important and significant update, I would say, in terms of defensive lines. I mean, the Krasnohorivka update is pretty significant, but this right here is a major advance. This has been an area where the Russians have been stuck for quite a long time. The Ukrainians have taken very good advantage of this high point. We will go over to the topographical map and look at it here in a second. But this is a significant advance, and it puts the Russians on the next line of Ukrainian defense. If they begin to move through Novobakhmutivka into Solovoli and up into Orchitny, it's going to this is going to cause major problems for the Ukrainians along this entire line. If you guys don't know what the line looks like, it is something like this right now. The line comes here, down through Novobakhmutivka, back over here, potentially down to Umansk, but I think it's going to be something more like this. So this is the next line of defense, and you can see that the Russians are already pressing up into that next line of defense. This is bad news. This is bad news for the Ukrainians. I did not expect the line to move here. I expected more movement into these two sort of salients right here, geographic salients. But the Russians have made this advance up into this Dacha area. And so this is very bad news for Novobakhmutivka, and just very good news for the Russians overall. I'm going to actually take us over to the topographical map so you guys can see what I'm talking about. All right, so here's Avdiivka. We're going to zoom in, and you will be able to see where the Russians have basically pushed up and captured this entire high ground right here. They've also pushed out and captured this slight high ground, but Orchitny is still advantageously positioned on this hill back here. So Again, first steps, right? The Russians have now pushed up and they are pushing along this rail line, along this extremely elevated territory. When you look at the rest of the map, you can see the Russian plan. They want to follow this rail line all the way back over here. And this is the start. So this move right here is vital. It's pretty incredible that they actually made it up and that the advance has been so quick. It really speaks to sort of the deplorable situation that the Ukrainians are in. And now they have a jump off point to launch attacks on Orchitny. They also can come over here to, I forget the name of the town, Novokalinove, and then to the west as well, or southwest, I guess, towards Novobakhmutivka. So the situation is on the Avdiivka salient is getting worse and worse. I don't think this line is as well prepared. And I think that the Ukrainians are going to have a very difficult time holding it now that the Russians have secured this high ground. They will start branching out, and it's going to just the ball's just going to start rolling here. We're getting back into this area where the Ukrainians do not have a significant amount of defenses behind Avdiivka, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And Russian artillery and glide bombs and Lancets and missile strikes are going to become more and more effective as the situation becomes more and more fluid. The side with overwhelming firepower is going to be able to take advantage of it. The Ukrainians are in a very bad way, and things could get very, very dicey here. Remember, I told you my idea for where the Russian goal is to follow this rail line basically all the way into Pokrovsk, get behind the Ukrainian garrison in New York, Toretsk, Konstantinivka back here, just cause major issues and force a Ukrainian retreat out of these urban conglomerates without forcing a major fight here. The Russians don't want to lose the troops that it's going to take to capture Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, all of these large urban settlements. So if they can get behind, whether it's through Izium or down here through Pokrovsk, I think that that's the Russian goal right now. All right. Back over to the map for just a little bit. I don't know what the timetable is here. It's hard to tell because the Russians do this thing where they will push in one area, and then as soon as the Ukrainians rotate, it's just stretching and squeezing, right? So this Krasnohorivka, there was no advancement here for a while, and then all of a sudden we get this breakthrough. You probably expect the Ukrainians to send in some fresh reserves. Movement will slow down here. Wherever those fresh reserves are hurting from, that's where you're going to begin to see movement. Potentially Chasiv Yar, potentially the Seversk salient. You just don't know. But zooming in on the Chasiv Yar area, a further Russian advance into these high-rise buildings right here, just 3 or 4 story buildings, but a significant advance because it is really starting off the urban fighting in this area. It's widening the approach into the city, which makes Russian logistics easier and easier. Eventually, when this falls, and particularly when the trench fortification that's on the outside of this road right here, on the outside of these houses, you can't see it, but there's a pretty extensive trench fortification right here. Once that falls, this entire town on this side of this canal should collapse pretty soon. And then from there, the Russians will branch out into Kalinina and then down along the canal. And I think the Russian goal right now, I've said it multiple times, but I think the Russian goal is to just level out along this canal right here and just stop the line right here, and then focus on other areas of the front, particularly the south, out of Avdiivka, out of Novomihailovka, out of Krasnohorivka. You can see where the Russians are, the Russian plan here. It's not hard, guys. You just got to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Where are the Russians advancing? They're advancing along the railroad, along this highway towards Pokrovsk. They're advancing out of Krasnohorivka because if you threaten this area, supply to Ugledar becomes much, much more difficult. So we're looking at multiple axes of advance down here in the south. I just think that this is the area where the Russians are going to go. I think it's the most vulnerable. It's the most difficult for the Ukrainians to defend, and I fully expect the Russians to capitalize on that. Also, the Seversk salient seems ripe for a Russian advance as well, particularly this southern sector right here. Not so much Bilohorivka up in the north, but this southern area. So we could definitely see some movement here very, very soon. All right. And then the final push we have down here in the south is just more of like a map update. We got some combat footage, positional fighting. The Russians are in this area, which is not that significant. But again, it's an advance along the road, which is important. And it brings the Russians closer to the 0532 highway. I've never seen this orange field before. I've looked at this map for thousands of hours, and I just ignore kind of this section because there's not a lot that happens here, but that's interesting. I wonder what that is. What do you think of Speaks the Truth YouTube channel? I don't think I've seen that YouTube channel, my good man. I don't think I've seen it. All right. I'm going to take us over and we're going to look at a news article, and then I have some stuff from my Twitter. And yeah, we'll talk about Iran after that. So this is the big news today. Johnson, the House Majority Leader for the Republicans, or the, I don't know, is the Majority Leader different from the Speaker? Yes, I think so. He's the Speaker. So he's bringing the bills to the House. Republicans are not particularly happy about this because they wanted these bills split up. The Republicans are all for sending aid to Ukraine. To Israel. Usually they're pretty on board with sending money to Taiwan, but lately there's been a lot of discussion about not sending money to Ukraine unless there are some border discussions, some negotiations about border security, stuff like that. You got to realize, guys, that the United States is in the middle of its political election cycle, right? This is a much bigger deal in the United States than anywhere else in the world, I would say, in terms of the willingness to just drop like Ukraine. That's a multi-billion-dollar project. We're overinvested. We shouldn't be giving up on it like we are. We should technically, but in terms of like the greedy political viewpoint, you shouldn't be giving up on Ukraine. There's still money to be made. There's still damage you can do to the Russians, this, that, and the other. But we're in an election campaign, and everybody is more focused on re-election than anything that's happening outside of the United States. You got to think of it sort of like everybody right now is in a position where they are threatened by every single event that happens. Every single decision that they're making right now is not to advance their career, it's to save their career, right? Everybody is trying to play very careful, play both sides, not upset anybody, but get stuff done. It's very complicated, and that's what this is. So Johnson is bringing 3 bills to the House. I believe it's a Ukraine bill, a Ukraine bill, a Taiwan bill, and a Israel bill. I'll actually take us over to my Twitter so you guys can see what the bills actually consist of, because I do have that saved in my bookmarks. And then we can just go through my Twitter stuff. But here it is. So this is a leaked estimation. So just be careful. I might not be real, but this looks pretty genuine. This is about the numbers that they were talking about. So 48 billion for Ukraine. Unfortunately for Ukraine, 20, let's just say 20 billion of that goes to the replenishment of DoD stocks. So all the shit that we've given Ukraine, they're paying themselves to refill it. Basically what that means. 14.8 billion for DoD ops in EUCOM. So this is all the money that's required for all of the intelligence that the U.S. runs, all of the the flights that they're running with their drones, with their reconnaissance aircraft, this, that, and the other. Any operations that are happening in Europe, that's what that is for. So you're already talking about more than half of the bill not even going to Ukraine. And then here we have the money that's actually going to Ukraine. So this is for the purchase of weapons, U.S. weapons, $13.8 billion, and then $7.85 billion direct support to the Ukrainian government, which means financial aid. Hello. Somebody just said hello, Aiden. Hello. This is a really, really bad deal for Ukraine. This is much less money than they need. And it doesn't really solve their main issues, which are air defense, artillery shell procurement, and manpower. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to get out of this. Probably just more armored vehicles, basically the stuff that is going to allow them to keep fighting for a longer period of time. This is a really, 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 really bad thing for Ukraine. This is bottom of the barrel, and I don't even know if it's going to pass. I wouldn't doubt that it passes, but you know, of all of them, I see Israel passing. I see the Taiwan, you know, part of it passing. I think there's a Taiwan part, right? Yeah, Indo. So, you know, that's 20 billion for Ukraine is not what Ukraine needs, right? And that's not all going to come in at one time. That's going to be spread out. So it's not very good. Now we go to the Israeli part of the bill, which is $4 billion for air defense, which makes sense because they launched. I'll talk about it, but they launched about $1 billion worth of air defense last night or the other night to stop the Iranian attack. 1.2 billion for Iron Beam, which is their direct energy weapon for air defense. 4 billion for the replenishments of stock to the DoD. So again, the military industrial complex is just wetting its beak on these bills. 3.5 billion in FMS for Israeli to purchase U.S. weapons. So that's just a loan. And then 800 million for ammunition plant improvements. Again, this is stuff that's not going to take into effect until 2025. So 2026, 2027 sort of deal. So, and remember that, you know, 19 billion for the replenishment of DoD stocks does not go as far as 19 billion in Russia, right? This is going to be mismanaged, just like, you know, every fucking military program is mismanaged. This is going to go the exact same direction. All this money is just going to get mismanaged. Yeah, this is a bad deal for Ukraine. I mean, it's better than what they have right now, so whatever. But this is not what Ukraine wants. This is what Israel wants, and Israel's going to get that. The Red Sea is probably going to get its portion, but I just don't know if if this is going to be allowed to pass. This is the impasse right here. Not so much this stuff. Oh, also a $3.3 billion submarine base. Just slip that in. Just slip that little extra bit in. Because, you know, the education doesn't need $3.3 billion. And nah, keep the people stupid. But yeah, so that's the supposed leaked bill. All right. I will talk about the other stuff I have in my bookmarks. This is just interesting to listen to.
If the U.S. can and allies can help shoot down Iranian drones over Israel, why can't they do the same over Ukraine?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming too. Look, different conflicts, different airspace, different threat picture. And the president has been clear since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. The United States is not going to be involved in that conflict in a combat role, and we haven't. We have been providing Ukraine the tools that they need to help defend their
he's
airspace.
like a lizard.
And unfortunately, we
I have
can't
a hard
do that
time
right
listening
now
to him. It's just
because
lies.
we don't have that national
All he
security
does is
supplemental
lie,
funding
and they never give a
we
real
so
answer.
desperately
It's
need.
crazy.
If the U.S.
You will never
can,
hear.
and
You will
allies
never
can
hear
help
a yes or no
shoot
from these
down
guys.
Iranian drones.
You'll never hear a yes or no. They ask them questions and then they give some loop around answer that doesn't really ever answer anything and you know, protects strategic ambiguity. But right here, he pretty much lays down the law and says, no, Israel gets certain protections that Ukraine will never get. A lot of people took this kind of harsh because it is what it is, right? And then another thing I wanted to talk about was this fire at one of the ammunition plants in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I don't know the extent of the damage, but this is the sort of thing that you have to be very careful of, because the U.S. has so little artillery shell production, and you're talking about putting money back into this very limited artillery shell production. If you lose if a fire rips through this section of your artillery production, this is where 155 artillery shells are produced. This is what the U.S. needs more than anything on the planet, and it is going to be the most vulnerable to, first off, espionage, right, and some sort of attack. These areas are extremely vulnerable, and even if it's not an attack, when you're working overtime on production lines, accidents happen. You need more than one plant. The reason why, even if a plant gets completely blown up in Russia, there's still 4 other plants producing the same exact thing. That's not how it works in the U.S. And the loss of one plant like this, even for a week, is going to significantly impact U.S. artillery production. So, just another thing to think about. We've seen all of the arson, all the fires, the smoking accidents in Moscow. Imagine if China activated its cells. Imagine if Russia activated its cells in the United States. You could see some pretty significant damage to the U.S. military-industrial complex just with simple fires. So, just something to keep your eye on. Industrial accidents, quote unquote. And then this is just funny. I just had these videos I thought were pretty funny. This is David Cameron talking about the Israeli attack on the Iranian embassy.
Reckless and dangerous thing for Iran to have done. And I think the whole world can see all these countries that have somehow wondered, well, what is the true nature of Iran? It's there in black and white.
What would Britain do if a hostile nation flattened one of our consulates?
Well, we would take the very strong action.
Classic. So Israel does it. Iran reacts. Iran is overreacting, and it's unacceptable. If it happens to Britain, if somebody leveled a US or a British embassy, the response would be overwhelming, and it's ridiculous. It's just hypocrisy. It is like mindless hypocrisy. They can't think 2 steps ahead of what they're supposed to say, and so they find themselves in completely disastrous situations like that. That makes them look like a fucking clown. Are you kidding me? The embassy. So guys, the consulate was hit, but it was right next to the embassy. It's no different. It's the exact same thing. They consider it the exact same. It's Iranian sovereign territory. And the important people were in the consulate at the time. So it's actually much, much bigger deal than hitting an embassy. All right. That's all I had for Twitter. Now I wanted to just talk about the Iranian strikes, what I think is going on, how I see things playing out. And I'll just give a rundown. I'm going to get a little bit more comfortable here since we're talking. All right. Basically, what's going on, what happened, the Iranians actually followed through with their promise. They conducted an operation to strike military targets inside of Israel. And this came 12 days after the Iranian embassy and consulate were struck by a Israeli missile strike, killing a number of generals, and I believe 15 people total died. So a good number of civilians were in the building. This violates basically every single international law. Consulates and embassies are supposed to be diplomatic missions. They are not to be targeted. This is a big no-no. This is a huge deal. I'm pretty sure the Iranians messed with one of our embassies in the 80s, and it was a very, very big, it was an issue. But when Israel messes with other people's embassies, it's a justified, legitimate strike for no good reason. Anyway, there was about 2 weeks, 12 days of waiting. Everybody was waiting for the Iranian response. The Iranians were talking a lot about it, saying that the Israelis were going to get slapped in the face. They were going to, it was going to be a big deal. this, that, and the other. People were kind of like in the nothing ever happens sort of category. Iran's bluffing. They're not going to do it. And I think Iran really came out and shocked a lot of people with going through with the strike. The strike consisted of probably about 100 Garand 2 drones, 30 or so ballistic or cruise missiles that were launched from Iraq, and then a good amount, probably 40 to 100, I don't know the exact number, of ballistic missiles were fired from Iran proper at Israel. So already something is happening. This is an act of war, a very clear act of war, not unwarranted. This is a retaliation for a very clear act of war that was done by Israel against Iran in Damascus, Syria. But so already something's happening, right? This is already an act of war. This is already a major escalation. This is a very big deal. But there was a lot of misconceptions about what this strike was. I want everybody to just erase all preconceptions they have about the strike and just listen to this argument and tell me if this is logical and sound. So Iran gets its embassy struck, right? That's where this starts. 12 days go by. So Israel has very good intelligence. The U.S. has very good intelligence about what's going on in Iran. Even if they wanted to surprise Israel, it would be very difficult. This was never a surprise attack, and for more than one reason. But just to, even if nothing was said through back channel doors, the Israelis knew when this attack was coming. It was very clear when it's coming. You can see the activity. They have great intelligence. They know what's going on, right? 12 days go by. We don't get anything. And then the U.S., basically those entire 12 days were telling us that in the next 24 to 48 hours, the Iranians are going to strike. It's going to be this massive strike. U.S. intelligence was correct. And the reason why U.S. intelligence was correct was because this was telegraphed by the Iranians. They, 24 hours before the strike, called basically every nation in the Middle East and had conversations through the foreign minister. They talked the whole time. They told them what was going on. If you watched any of the air traffic control mapping, the radars, thank you for the super sticker, by the way, you guys would have seen that flights were canceled by major commercial airlines. Basically, airspaces were shut down. Jordan had declared a state of emergency. All sorts of things were going on. It was very clear that an Iranian strike was coming. Everybody in the region knew an Iranian strike was coming. Iran had even basically told everybody what they were going to strike, and they did so on purpose. There was a method to this madness, and that is in what this strike aimed to do. This strike was not to deal damage to the Israelis. In fact, it was pretty much the opposite. The Iranians had to strike a sensitive target, a very well protected target. They had to prove that they have deterrence from Israel. They had to prove that they could penetrate Israel's fantastic air defense network, which is supported by the Jordanian Air Force, the United States Air Force, and the Israeli Air Force flying outside of Israel, so in Syria and other places like that. This is a very complex air defense network that is, one of the best army in the world, I guess you could say, in the United States, technically. Had an air defense ship right offshore that assisted, and still we saw 7 impacts at least of ballistic missiles on the Air Force bases, or the IDF Air Force bases, that were very clearly already going to be the target. They were the place where the F-35s took off from to go strike the consulate. So this was obviously going to be a target. And the Iranians proved exactly what they needed to prove. They used a micro fraction of their drone fleet, their missile fleet. In fact, most of the ballistic missiles they launched were incredibly old. They sort of used this as a way to get rid of some of their old stock. So they didn't even use their best ballistic missiles. with all of the top end fanciness. They didn't use any of their hypersonic missiles. They didn't necessarily completely overwhelm Israeli air defense, because if the attack would have gone on for another 30 minutes and there would have been another 3 or 4 salvos of ballistic missiles, the success rate would have just improved every single salvo, right? Because the air defenses need time to reload, they get worn out, they don't have enough ammo, this, that, and the other, all sorts of things happen. This strike was incredibly successful. It did exactly what it needed to do without giving the Israelis a reason to strike Iran. I mean, technically, they gave them a reason by just striking Israel, but there was not so much of an escalatory nature to this strike. Nobody seems to have died, which is pretty impressive. And they showed Israel's vulnerabilities. So the Iranian attack was successful. I think politically it was very successful. And I think it really puts Israel in a very difficult position. They did not bring attention necessarily to this strike by doing a lot of damage to any Israeli facilities, which is a good thing, right? The Iranians don't want a war. The Americans don't want a war. They're not trying to escalate. They're trying to put Israel in its place, remind Israel of its position in the Middle East, because they are out of control. They are unhinged. They are off the leash. Something needs to change, and that change apparently is going to come from Iran. So Iran conducts this strike, and now Israel is in a position where they need to decide, are they going to go against their Western partners' wishes, who are basically funding this entire campaign, and strike Iran directly? Do they go after proxies and potentially look sort of weak? I mean, Iran strikes your sovereign territory and you don't respond. And guys, I know that Iran technically retaliated. There should be no response. This is the eye for an eye thing. It should be called off, right? But that's not how Israel works. A lot of the hardliners want a war. A lot of the war hawks in the United States, like Lindsey Graham and people like that, Marco Rubio, I'm sure would not mind a war with Iran. It's going to make them a lot of money, and it's going to progress their vision for how the U.S. foreign policy should work. So I fully expect, this is my prediction, I fully expect a overdramatic Israeli response. I think they're going to hit a sensitive target on Iranian soil. I think it's going to do the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. And I think the Iranian response is going to be overwhelming and significant. I think we are going to find ourselves in a regional war in the Middle East. I think that it actually will end up benefiting Biden at the end of the day. I think it's going to be a major distraction. It's going to sort of unite the Republicans, not so much, and the Democrats. I don't mean like the normal like voter base, but in terms of the actual leadership of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, people are going to make money off of this. So I think we're going to see a war in the Middle East. Does that happen next week? I don't know. It could definitely happen. I do believe it will happen before the election. I think that Israel is going to go through with Rafah, which I think is going to create major issues. And after that, they're poised to go into southern Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah issue. So I think Israel's on a warpath. I think they can't be talked down. I think that the U.S. has almost no control over this ally. It's an actual ally. They actually make their own decisions. And for some reason, we pay for everything for them. So, yeah, expect an Israeli response in the next 24 to 48 hours, I would say. You'll know it when it's coming, most likely. But then again, the Israelis are kind of mad dogs. They will just fly into Syrian airspace and strike some target in Iran. And we could very well be in a war next week. I think that the Israelis are completely unhinged at this point. I don't think they understand what is good for them, what is beneficial for Israel. I don't think they care. I think Bibi is on his last legs, and he's doing everything he can to stay in power. And the hardliners agree with that stance because they want to go to war with Israel. It's what a lot of people in Iran want. So get ready for that, guys. I am not confident there will be any consequences for Israel if they actually respond. It seems that they can do whatever they want. Yes, I agree. I have no understanding of this. I don't know if it's just the evangelical, crazy Christian aspect of it, where they think that this is going to bring on the rapture. And it doesn't matter what war happens. It doesn't matter if nukes are dropped. That's part of the whole prophecy sort of thing. That is unbelievably delusional to me. I honestly say that the Iranians should just give Israel all of that land. And once they give all that land and the prophecy is supposed to come true and the rapture is supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, maybe U.S. support for Israel will drop off and then they can just disappear. That was one of my thoughts the other day. Just give them everything that the prophecy requires. Once the prophecy doesn't come true, then we can reassess our commitments in the Middle East and our allies and our partnerships, because they're not doing anything for the American populace. But I agree with you, Tyler. That shit is annoying. They're just insolent children. They just do whatever they want, and money just keeps coming in. They commit a genocide and continue a genocide endlessly. And the U.S. says, stop that genocide. You better stop. This is the last warning. You better stop doing it. Genocide's bad. But we never do anything about it. So it's just pointless. It's why I don't particularly like talking about the whole Israel thing, because no matter what I say, I will have no impact on that region. I will have no impact on people's thinking about it. I'm just giving you guys my opinion. I don't honestly give a shit. I couldn't care. It doesn't matter. It's all ideologically driven. That's all it is. Okay, I'll do a couple questions and then I'll wrap it up here, guys. How does Western assault rifles compare to Russians using the standard AK variants? Should Russia move on from the AK? I particularly like an AK more than an M4 variant or a AK variant. I fired an M4 much more than I fired an AR, or an AK, or an AR, like a standard whatever. They have multiple different variations, but I think AKs are just a little bit better. They suit me better in terms of what I like when I'm, clearing a room or whatever. But I don't know. I think the Russians like the AK. I think it's simple. I think it does what it needs to do in the field, and there's not a lot of people dying from rifles these days in this day and age. So, I mean, really, I don't think that it's that big of a deal. I would say focus on artillery and deep strike weapon systems. When do you think Israel will invade southern Lebanon? Whenever they're ready. They have to deal with Rafah first. If they invade southern Lebanon before Rafah is finished, something went wrong and it's not going according to their plans. It's all fun until gas prices double. Get ready. Because the second things get out of hand, Saudi oil facilities are going to get hit. Everything in the Middle East is just going to go up. Strait of Hormuz is going to close, and it's going to be crazy. When do you think Orchitny will fall? I have no idea, man. It's inappropriate for me to put timelines on things. If the Russians can reach the town, I think it will fall actually rather quickly. I think that the Ukrainians are now in a very, very difficult position. I think you guys are going to just see chunk here, chunk here, chunk here, every day, a big chunk, big chunk, big chunk, big chunk, until there's an actual difficult decision made in the Ukrainians' retreat. Does funding pass in Congress? It's in the House, so we'll see. Clearing a room. Yes. If you guys have ever done any kill room work, you kick down doors, you breach into a room and you clear it, and then you move on to the next room. I've done that more times than I can count. Never actually used it, but just have done a lot of training with it. And I mean, I would rather have a shotgun if I was doing it, honestly, but between an AK and an AR platform, I'd take an AK probably. I just like the stopping power of an AK too. Being able to drop somebody with 7.62 is beneficial, especially when you're dealing with unarmored, adversaries. 7.62 puts people in the dirt. 5.56 does as well, but there's just a chance that if you shoot them in a non-lethal area, like if somebody's running and you hit them in the shoulder, you're going to get a through and through that doesn't actually stop them, whereas a 7.62 will tumble and usually put somebody down. But if you're firing through body armor, you probably want a 5.56 because that's going to penetrate body armor much better than a 7.62 will. Do you think nuclear weapons could be used in an Israeli-Iran war? Yes, definitely. I think the second the Israelis figure out that they're overmatched, they will use a nuke. I don't think it's going to lead to a larger nuclear war. I think it's going to be this eye-opening moment where everybody goes, what the fuck just happened? Holy shit, we need to calm down, step back, reassess, figure out what's going on. I think it's not going to be like the spark that ignites a global nuclear war. I do believe it could be the spark that ignites a like World War III. Does that go nuclear? Potentially, but I don't think that just Israel using a single like tactical nuclear weapon is going to do that. Yep, the Samson option. It's terrifying, but you know, when your state, when you're basically faced with the destruction of your state, it's a use them or lose them sort of situation. How is Israel so confident in starting a war? Because they think the U.S. is going to come in and protect them. They think the U.S. is going to run a fucking Desert Storm level strike campaign against Iran and just completely wipe Iran, and then they won't have to deal with them. It's part of their planning is that the U.S. is literally going to fight for them because Israel can't do it. Israel's going to get overwhelmed with missiles and just get hit and hit and hit and hit and hit and hit and hit, and they're never going to be able to reestablish their airfields to strike Iranian targets. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and the Israelis are going to be forced to use a nuke. Same with the U.S. If the U.S. ever gets into a war with a nuclear superpower like China, and they lose a aircraft carrier, that's like a U.S. city getting demolished. They're going to use a nuke. You'd be surprised how fast things will jump straight to that nuclear threshold. Like instantly, it's going to happen. And people are much more comfortable now with the idea of using tactical battlefield nukes. They think that it can be done without escalating the war to a thermal nuclear stage. How many troops do you think it would take Russia to take Kharkov or a major city? So I don't think you're really going to see fighting in major cities. I think you're going to see most of the fighting in the east. The Ukrainian army is on its last legs. The mobilization's not going to happen fast enough. Things are just going to deteriorate and get worse and worse and worse. It's why nobody wants to pass funding, because everybody can see the writing on the wall. Literally every single person, even pro-Ukrainians now, they all see the writing. They know that the last 6 months has been horrible. Ever since the counteroffensive failed, things have just been downhill, right? So, I mean, everybody sees it. Everybody knows what's going to happen, but some people would rather live in disbelief because it's more comfortable and safe. All right, last one here. Let's see. Oh yeah, look, he says I'm pro-Ukrainian and I see it. Yep, it's difficult, man. They know. I mean, you can't hide from reality forever. You just can't. And it's gonna come home. And when that reality comes home, people are gonna stop talking to me. I know it. I've been waiting 2 years to be like, haha, I'm right. And people are just gonna block me and stop talking to me. It's gonna suck. I read that only territorial defense brigades are defending the route to Ochitny. How good do you think territorial defense units are? I think every unit in the Ukrainian army is starting to become a territorial defense unit. I think they're being filled with inexperienced troops and just trying to be kept on the battlefield. In terms of sitting in a trench, they're just as good as any Marine brigade or anything like that. I mean, I don't think that the quality of Ukrainian troops right now, I mean, it's going to matter in terms of how well they hold a line, but the Russians aren't really fighting that kind of war right now. They're just bombing or shelling everything until it doesn't exist and then moving into that space. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a territorial defense guy with 3 days of experience or a Azov guy who's been fighting consistently since 2014. A 500 kilogram bomb will liquefy everybody's organs the exact same. Trust me. There are no superheroes on the battlefield. So Yeah, the 47th mech got absolutely crushed outside of Avdiivka. Dyson for cleaning a room, shotgun for clearing a room. And that's where we're going to leave it today. That is the best. Dyson is a good vacuum too. My dad likes Kirby's. I've literally my entire life, my dad has talked about how the Kirby vacuum is like the best thing. We have like this vacuum from the 1950s that weighs 30 fucking tons in my house. Well, not anymore. I don't know where that Kirby is, but in my entire childhood growing up, he was talking about that. And bro, cleaning with that piece of shit. It's literally from like the 50s. It looks like something that should be in Fallout. It's got the big bag on the back, and he's like, yeah, the sucking power is the best. I said, Dad, don't talk about sucking power. All right, guys. That's where I'm going to leave it off. Thank you so much. Please like, follow, subscribe, do all the things you do that you can do to help me. It's free. It's simple. I will see you guys tomorrow, probably for an earlier stream. I think I'm going to try to get on around 12 Eastern Standard Time. So I'm glad I could do a late one for the boys. I appreciate you all, and I will see you guys on the next one. Love you. Bye.